spine training is a lost category of exercises, right? Because like one of the things that people focused on a lot in hyper detail online is like execution cue, because it's salient, right? Like the idea of I have 90 seconds, like what can I talk about? It's like, are you going to talk about the sarcoplasmic reticulum in 90 seconds? It's like, no, I could probably get out like a pretty detailed how to do a single arm cable row for the 10 billionth time. So I'm just going to do, and like, I look, I probably have 10 single arm cable videos on the internet. So like, I'm not throwing shade. It's just kind of what the format allows for, right? Like medium is the message. So like super detail is not really in the cards. So picking super detailed topics, and the spine can be a super detailed topic. So I find people like they're watching people program is very much just a reflection of like the 30 or 40 people that show up on their feed all day. And because either people aren't interested in it or the medium doesn't really support talking about the complexity of it, people don't train the fucking spine anymore. And it is ROI for me. If I have like lifts that are starting to plateau or I have pain that's starting to settle in, elbows, knees, I take a look at my program and I go, do I have any like really heavy loadable spine stuff in here? And the answer almost undoubtedly is no, I don't. I've been like a bitch ass on machines, or like I've avoided some of the hard stuff. And like I'm telling you, dude, like not the second, but the week I put in some heavy loadable spine stuff, the stuff that was an issue, like I got this ab hernia type ab tear fascia issue on my right side. I got some ankle stuff. I get this weird upper back from my pec tear. Within a week, I'm chilling, like extra chilling. So it's a weird category that just, it's not demonized, it's not lionized, it's just disappeared.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, I totally agree. And there needs to be a little bit of a distinction too, because I think like people might hear that and think core training is like, oh, I do my core training exercise, I do X, Y, and Z. But I would separate those two things in a bit of a way where like core training, yes, very important for spinal control, spinal stabilization, and this is kind of the gateway into any sort of loadable spine training exercise. But I think the idea behind spine training is being able to um, I guess buffer, or what's a better word than that? Having a higher capacity to deal with axial loading, right? And that's, I think, a big issue for people when they run into these things like a hernia or some sort of hip issue or shoulder issue, is that they don't have the capacity to actually axial load the spine and to be able to control that. And I think that's like, for me, if I were to choose, like, I've said this a million times, like one exercise to load my spine for the rest of my life, it would be a back squat, because there's so much axial load there that the demand on everything else to function at a high capacity to do it well, like hips, shoulders, core, scapula, like it forces everything to kind of pull its weight so that you can maintain structurally stable positions through the spine to be able to have some sort of meaningful output. And I think like, yes, we can look at movements like an RDL. We could look at like a squat or a front squat, and or even like a dumbbell row. We could say that's like an aspect of spine training. But the thing that I like is we look at this like in a more spine centric view than a muscle centric view, is that we're training through all three planes here. Like we're starting to create different demands at the spine, and the ability to buffer that force and distribute that in a safe and reproducible way. That's going to be the intention as we look at like, how are we actually dispersing force through the spine? And I think that's a really important view, as we distinguish like, no, let's talk about spine training here.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, I think it's my dividing line comes into planes of motion, right? Like what I think, and if the spine and the rib cage, and I guess to a certain degree the pelvis, if we look at loadability of every movement in the sagittal plane is just going to be higher, right?
Mm.
Any joint motion is most loadable in the sagittal plane, right? Now the thing with dealing with the spine is that like you're not really going to have, well, let's leave it at that. It's going to be the most loadable in the sagittal plane. So something where the bar is centrally located is going to like. I mean, I'm a big advocate of single arm dumbbell rows for the very reason that they're not as loadable as some of my other rows, right? Like they are not
Right.
necessarily a sagittal plane exercise as so far as the trunk is concerned, right? The trunk now has this offset center of mass, a combined center of mass. Your foot position will dictate how you support with your sort of third arm or your third stance, your extra hand. That'll all play a role in how much trunk rotation. And for me, that's a useful adaptation. Like to me, that's probably one of the more meaningful thoracic spine rib cage rotation drills you could do. Heavy dumbbell, pair of wrist straps, off to the races, and there's your transverse plane spine. But for me, it's like missing top end sagittal plane. That's like your tip of the spear. Like sagittal plane will always be your strongest. So everything is going to fall to that, right? That is going to be like the thing that can always be the most loaded. So like if I don't have to train my single arm row, but man, when I was squatting, I don't know, 600-700 pounds, I'm just going whatever the dumbbell rack is. I'm just going to the end of it.
Right.
Right? Like I just have 700 pounds on my back. I can put 200 pounds in my hand. Like that's just not a problem. Even without having to train that direct as an adaptation. It's like, oh, okay, I just got to like, it's exponents of the fourth or the quarter or whatever the fuck I was squatting. This is totally fine. Put a wrist strap on and I'm off to like I said, I'm off to the races. So I think for me, like there's something about, and I think it's the feedback component, and that's what I like about it. Like the Zercher position is an exercise that I see done. And look, we got homies that do it and they do it heavy, and maybe you're doing it as a constraint because you are like, I think of Josh Horn. And then what I fuck with Josh Horn, I mean, aside from literally everything, because he's the fucking man, is like Horn will listen to the podcast, be like, "Yo, I heard you talking shit about Zerchers," and then he's like, "That's a 550-pound Zercher squat." He's like, "Yeah, I added more weight to the Zercher because I heard." I'm like, "Yeah, good, I like that." Right, because if he was like Zercher 135 and was like trying to talk some shit, he's like, "No, I'm going to dunk on you losers, and I'm going to Zercher." But it's like, here's the thing: he trains football players. Football players are generally tough. The problem that I, as someone who trains people in real life, who doesn't just work on the internet, and we're kind of removing Josh from this conversation. Shout out Josh Horn, Josh the Horn on Instagram. Is the second I tell, oh, I don't know, Jiunta. The second we tell someone, let's say they're in their 50s or 60s, we go, hey, you know that joint you've never loaded in your entire life? You know that elbow that like maybe you put a grocery bag around once because you didn't want to take 2 fucking trips from the car? Yeah, we're going to take this barbell knurling and we're going to put that squarely in the crease of your elbow. How does that sound? It sounds like I'm about to find a new fucking trainer. Dude, you shout out Yo Murph. Yo Murph's got a deal, and not deal with, like Yo Murph trains probably more pro athletes than anyone I've ever met in my entire life, and rightfully so. We share clients, and if there's anything I can help with on the movement side or rehab side or training side, like shout out Yo Murph for being one of the most like open-minded dudes. He's been so generous enough to be like, hey, can you take a look at so-and-so? And like, I'm not going to put this guy on blast, but there is a very, very well-paid, very, very talented starting pitcher in Major League Baseball who will not lift without his lifting gloves. But think about it, right?
Yeah.
You got homeboy that's collecting mad checks, like a 10-year professional in the league. And we're gonna Zercher squat the starting pitcher. Really? Is that what we're gonna Zercher squat the 50-year-old client who doesn't lift weights? So it's like you're gonna take a guy who is worried about Tommy Johns and you're gonna explain to him that this is, but when you're sitting with your ring light in your fucking bedroom in the middle of the country somewhere far away from an ocean, you're just sitting there with no hopes and dreams and you're just creating content about Zercher squats. It's like, yeah, that's great. In the 400 pixels by 400 pixel aspect ratio, whatever dumb shit you just put up, go ahead. Zercher whatever the fuck you want and tell every other aspiring not strength and conditioning coach to go ahead and do that too. Well, real people out in the real world training real people are just going to be like, you're going to get halfway through the demonstration before your client goes, yeah, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm not doing that. So you can think of something else or I'm going to leave.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just like, but then I appraise it from an efficacy standpoint. I go, okay, center of mass. Yeah. An anterior load, that thing's going to pull for sure. Right. Like that'll pull into extension. Like I get that. But like for me, one of the goaded exercises, and again, scaling, and I think it's way easier to scale into this exercise than a Zercher squat because like the tissue tolerance at the elbow. It's like having your clients pull hook grip for no reason.
Yeah.
It's like, what? You know what type of sadist you have to be to just take someone with like no real strength goals that just doesn't want to like not die and be like, hey, you know that your thumbs that you like that we've evolved to have and is a big part of like, being bipedal apes. Like, oh yeah? Yeah. So fuck them forever. And they'd be like, yeah, probably not. I was like, don't worry. It'll just take a couple of years for you to get used to the pain of this. Like, what are you doing? It's like, what? And we just move up to the elbow. But like for me, when it comes to training the spine, and this is more of a call, not necessarily for general population, but like, dude, bring back the safety squat bar good morning. Like I think
Headshot.
pound for pound, when I'm thinking about like spinal exercises, like the good morning to me, like especially if I'm dealing with, and I've dealt with a handful. Well, no, fuck, at this point, I've dealt more than a handful. If I'm dealing with any sort of knee issue, I'm starting here. To me, it's like it is the I think it's like to me it's like the purest form of hinge,
Yeah.
right? Like I just love that exercise so much. And if I have someone who can't bend the knee, I think of like, okay, if I started SSB good morning and I work from such a hip dominant movement to moving in from hip dominance into knee dominance, like on one end of a spectrum, it's like SSB good morning to heels elevated goblet squat is a progression of loaded knee flexion, right? Like how much flexion can you get? It's like, well, can I start someone immediately post op? Right. No, like I even look at kettlebell swings, not an exercise that I do a ton, but an exercise in like some sort of subacute knee issue where like someone can't get into deep knee flexion, maybe a little bit more athletic. Yeah, I'll use a kettlebell swing for knee rehab because it's not loading the knee a lot, but it's still loading the knee. There's a coordination, there's a timing with the hip, there's a timing with the shoulders and arms, right? There's a peak force at the moment of knee flexion, even though the knee flexion is not extensive. So, but go to goat spine training, in my opinion, is SSB good morning. SSB good morning is just you want to just ruin your day.
Yeah.
SSB good morning. You're going right to the couch after that. You're fine.
That reminds me of like peak weight James Thayer. That's what I think of when I think of SSB. Good. Dude's just thick ass torso. But like,
Well, so go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, like, back to the Zerchers. Anytime you have to explain that bruising is the buy-in for an exercise, it's
Right.
probably the wrong exercise.
Oh, see
Like,
you later.
yeah,
Oh man.
that's hilarious. But
So for me, I'm gonna offer something. One more
okay,
thing on this, and I think it's actually meaningful. When something dawned on me when we were in school, it was like one of the few aha moments that we had in school when I was like in a class and it was like a clinical pearl. I'm like, oh, this is why I went to school. Like this transfers over to like what I actually care about, which is lifting weights. And that was fuck. I think it was called the Adams test. And I forget who taught the it was an orthopedic evaluation. I don't even do you know what I'm talking about? Did you
no,
show up to that class?
probably
So
not.
if I'm not mistaken, and mind you, I'm 10 years out of school, so I'm probably 12 years out of this class. And it's been something that I've never forgotten. And it was a test for functional scoliosis.
Hmm.
And essentially the Adams test, if I remember if it's called that, is you like block the person's pelvis and you watch them hinge. And if the scoliosis begins to normalize as you hinge, it's an acquired scoliosis. As opposed to a congenital scoliosis, that spine's going to stay, sort of S shaped and there's not much you can do about it. And, the thing with that is acquired or congenital scoliosis tend to have an acquired degree of emphasis to it, right? Like you have a congenital scoliosis, your spine sort of developed in this S curve way. Uh, your function is then going to double down and potentially contribute more. So you get to see, and it was cool to watch it. As someone in our class had a scoliosis, and I forget who, Alyssa Hollum or something, that volleyball player chick. I think she had, and then as she like, you hinge over, you see that S curve in the spine, you see that S curve start to normalize, and it was like, oh, sick. So for me, it's just like, I have acquired scoliosis through my pec tear, but like people have a lot of asymmetries through their body that gets to either starts from or gets to the spine. So I love this idea of like getting the spine inflection to normalize any of those lateral deviations. And as long as you scale that appropriately, you can, and this one, you can load the absolute fucking shit out of this exercise, right? Like, and you hit that bottom position, and it's just the torque is at the greatest. I also love the position of the head, like head
Mhm.
position, especially for like older populations. Like I really think that perturbation of the position of the head and the eyes through a movement, forcing to get better data and more trusted data from your muscles, like especially in that position, is so useful. Like you got this thing kind of like riding up on your neck. It can be like hard to breathe. You're kind of looking down on the floor, and it's like, hey, don't go there, don't go to the floor. You can't look up. Right? It's probably a bad strategy to fucking go through the movement. And that's why I like the SSB, because it kind of pulls your spine forward, even from the cervical spine. So it's like, oh, I'm looking at the ground, but I don't want to go there. What do my muscles have to do, from like
Yeah.
the pressure in the feet through the adductors and hamstrings into the glutes and the erectors into like the lats and the rhomboids? Like for me, it's just bang for buck. It's something that I put as like as a point on the map. It's like, hey, we're not there yet, but this is the direction we're headed to from a function perspective. If I can get you here, and like obviously goal specific, like if I have an athlete that's, if I have an athlete that's a racket sport athlete, or if I have a baseball pitcher, am I aiming at that ultimately? Like, no, probably not. If they retire and they want to just kind of get generally fit, sure, yeah. Like, we gotta take into consideration the opportunity cost. But if I have a gem pop client, right, like they might not be able to squat first day, but I'm going to set them on a trajectory of building function to express it through a squat pattern down the road, right? They may not be able to overhead press or do a pull up first day, but on the roadmap of my improving their function, range of motion, stability, strength, et cetera, coordination, yeah, one day they'll be able to do a pull up. And I think an SSB good morning is so slept on. It just disappeared. That it's like, why, I know why, because it's fucking hard. But
Yeah.
it's like, man, good spine training is hard. Good spine training is not Pilates. Good spine training is not yoga. Good spine training, like if I'm going in and I'm doing like a spine part of my workout, it's the thing that's going to make me like the blown blood vessels in my head. Yeah, guess what? SSB good mornings are back, baby. They're fucking back.
Yeah. I love it. And I think there's a couple things a couple directions I want to take this. I haven't completely organized them in my brain. So you guys will get to watch that as a work in progress. But like the idea of the SSB, good morning. I think it's great because you can have such a lack of awareness around your body and still execute this very well, because gravity and the constraints of the safety squat bar, the handles in front of you, it puts you in a position to be able to execute on this as long as the intention is not falling over, right? It encourages good spinal stabilization. And something I would even put in as maybe, I don't want to say a prerequisite but something that is a like regression to this. And I think I've been vocal about this in the past. I think weighted carries are such an underutilized piece of training. And I think you could absolutely put those in that category of spinal training, right?
100%.
So something I think is incredible to teach like that. If we think of the natural curve of the spine, we're going to have that lordosis in the lumbar, so it kind of a curve that the apex is in the front of your body, versus the thoracic spine, you're going to have that kyphosis, an apex of the curve in the back of your body, and that's the position that we want to reinforce for maximal axial loading. So for our greatest capacity to buffer straight down forces. So like a few ways we can categorize forces in the spine: there's axial compression versus shear forces, like front to back, back to front. And then we can have kind of compression versus distraction forces in the spine as well. So like compression, think like SSB, good morning. Um, Distraction forces, think of like a pull up, right? You're hanging on a bar. So something I think that is very valuable for teaching the spinal stability as it pertains to both shoulder stability and lumbopelvic stability, mainly like hip extension, and I mean hip extension, not lumbar extension, is an anterior loaded carry. And I'm not necessarily talking Zercher. I think this is probably a better alternative to Zercher, but like a heavy like sandbag or med ball carry, I think is an insanely effective glute exercise. I'll put that out there, and someone can crucify me for that on the internet, and I'll know that they're a retard. But and also it helps with scapulothoracic stability, because what's happening is that anterior load's pulling your center of mass forward. So you have to push that rib cage back. As we're holding on to it, the loading forces a degree of protraction. So we're pushing the rib cage into the scapula as we're pulling the scapula into the rib cage, which allows us to stabilize around that kyphosis. And then with a little bit of cueing and awareness, we can create a neutral lumbar position, kind of circumferential core brace. And those are all prerequisite to getting true hip extension. So anyone who's done, I'll say a meaningful load is kind of like a smoke bomb term, but it needs to be something that is relatively challenging for the person in front of you, that forces them to use their core. It pulls them off balance so that they need to compensate for that, and they can maintain core position. If you load an anterior sandbag med ball carry to that extent, they're going to get a crazy amount of glute activation because they have no choice but to create hip extension using the glutes, as opposed to using lumbar extension as a compensation for a lack of hip extension.